I have gone through I don't know how many dozens of saddles over several decades of riding, and I know how uncomfortable poorly designed they could be, especially if they come standard with a bicycle. So this video is for those who want to protect their health and want to be comfortable while sitting on a bicycle. If you're interested in technical content, you may want to subscribe, and I'm putting links below, as I always do, for you to see products that you can research or purchase. If you look at old bicycle saddles, something between the dawn of the 20th century to about the middle of the century, you'll see that these saddles emphasize comfort and durability. They are often made of leather and metal. They have springs, and they are wide enough to support your actual sit bones rather than to force you to sit on your loin. Contemporary saddle designs are influenced mainly by professional racing. They are really cool looking, very tiny, very lightweight saddles. They look good, they are very light, they are good for what they were originally designed for, which is racing. But for the average person, somebody who uses bicycles casually, somebody who commutes, people who use bicycles for touring, for weekend trip, this is the exact opposite of what would be needed. In general, I'm not in favor of many of the approaches and attitudes I see being promoted by professional racing. Many of these people could not care less about their health, about their safety, and they just do whatever they have to do to maximize speed and efficiency, because of course they are racing. If your intention is to transition from a male to a female, then these kind of saddles might be of benefit. Or if you are willing to sacrifice your health and you want to get as much as a 24% gain on your speed, and you don't want to get a recumbent bicycle which would accomplish the same goal much more efficiently, then these practices and approaches might be of benefit to you. However, it is worth considering the health consequences. What happens to a lot of people, women also, is that they do suffer from jackhammering the perineum between the two legs, and especially for men, in addition to the prostate problems men already suffer from, which are only exaggerated by these kinds of narrow saddles, there is something nobody talks about, which is urethral strictures, which are extremely common, even more common than prostate enlargement. If you're a middle-aged or older man and you have a problem with voiding or the stream, and you're thinking that this is because of your enlarged prostate, it may not have anything to do with your prostate. You may just have urethral strictures, and I recommend that you look up this problem. There are plenty of information about this online. This is something that very commonly happens. And what do you expect to happen when you spend years jackhammering on the sensitive tissue that surrounds the urethra? This is an image of the human hip bone. You can see that there is an A-like cutout in the center. That's where all the fine tissue, the nerves, the ligaments, tiny muscles go, including the urethra. This is the last place where you want to apply pressure. Pressure should be applied at the so-called sit bones. The sit bones are just the bottom part of the hip bone. You can see the two protrusions on the two sides, and those should sit firmly on any comfortable seat or saddle, whether bicycle or otherwise. Consider the comfort and the support you are getting from the average scooter. A 50cc scooter that is speed limited to 25 miles an hour, which cannot even go as fast as the average bicycle, especially on a downhill. You can get even a Brompton up to 30 miles an hour. So these scooters can't even go as fast as the bicycle, and yet they come with tires far wider, far fatter than most any bicycle, except for a fat bike. They come with full front and rear suspension. And look at the seat that you get. You can't even describe this as a saddle. These are plush seats. So how can you claim that sitting on that teeny tiny racing seat that weighs a half a pound or a quarter pound is going to give you enough support, not to mention comfort and protection? Bicycle saddles typically come in 4 sizes, and moving from left to right, what you see on number 1 is your typical racing saddle. It's very light, very uncomfortable. It's really just there for somebody who's pedaling like crazy. It's if you're standing up from your saddle most of the time, like you see professional racers do. The second one is kind of a half racing compromise. I would describe it as a sport saddle. As you see, it even has a cutout. Not all of them have a cutout. Some racing saddles also have a cutout. That's supposed to cover your health, but it really does not. The third one is the first really comfortable one for most men, not for women who have wider hips, but for most men, it's probably gonna do the job. This is based on the traditional, old-fashioned, early to mid 20th century design. And the fourth saddle on the right side is a new and very modern saddle. Unfortunately, none of the top manufacturers, such as Brooks, have come out with a saddle of this size. What we have are cheap, typically Chinese-made manufactured saddles that are going to last for 5 years max. They don't cost much money, but they are excellent. They are wider than your sit bones, so you sit very comfortably. You don't sit on the edge of the seat, but you have plenty of padding all around it. If you look at the classical motorcycle saddle designs, that's pretty much the same thing. That's what you see. They come with a spring built in. They cost $40-50. I have links below. You should check out my shopping page. I have links to all of this stuff and see for yourself. I think the price is low enough for anybody to try them out. Comparing how these four saddles affect the skeleton, your anatomy. Look at number one. This is number one. Even if it has a cutout in the middle, it is pressuring straight against the tubes, the ligaments, the tiny muscles, the fine tissue that is all around your genitals, your rectum, the most sensitive areas of the body. And just as I said, a lot of people are confused, think that the cutout is going to do something. Yeah, it might give you a 10% improvement on the pressure, but you are still pressuring that sensitive area. Here's how saddle number two would affect your sit bones and your hip bones and your fine tissue. Once again, this is a big no-no for most people. This is only if you sit down only here and there and mostly stand up, which makes no sense because then you could just get a racing saddle. Granted, it's a bit more comfortable and jackhammers your genitals a bit less directly than the racing saddle, but it's still not, you're still not sitting on your sitting bone. And so long that you don't, you're never going to have real comfort and real support. And here is the anatomy or anatomic view of number three. This is the comfort saddle. This is the first time that you see the seat bones properly placed on the saddle. And that's why so many people who used to own the narrow or Brooks saddle, high quality leather saddles, and they always complain that no matter how much they try to break them in, they are still uncomfortable. It's not the breaking in thing that is uncomfortable, but the width of the saddle. With these saddles, what they typically say is that they are comfortable right out of the box. Now, once they break in, they will be even more comfortable than that. But the point is that breaking in is not going to change the width of the saddle. You have to get a saddle that is wide enough to allow your sit bones to sit properly and firmly on the saddle itself. And we finally arrive at the ultra wide saddle, or the butterfly saddle as I call it. Just like the previous one, your sit bones are properly sitting on something stable, but in this case they are not sitting on the edge. The edge of the seat is always the hardest and the least comfortable. In addition, there are people, I'm just showing you the same hip bone here, but hip bone widths they vary widely, and especially women have wider hips. So especially for women, it is worth considering an ultra wide saddle, but it's best to take measurements. Measurements are posted. I have links below. You can go and research the products yourself. In most cases, there are measurements, so you can measure, you can pretty much feel your sit bones by touching your behind, and you can measure how much space you need. But the most important thing is there is no such thing as too wide a seat. A seat can be too narrow and uncomfortably narrow. There is no such thing as an uncomfortably wide seat. So you can never be too wide. You can only be too narrow. Here are two saddles I have owned and actually like. The one on the left is a $200 saddle from Brooks. It has springs built in, very sophisticated suspension, just an amazing saddle. I can't say enough good about it. The one on the right is a $50 saddle. It's going to last maximum 5 years. The cheap stitching eventually is going to come apart. It's not a beautiful thing to look at. So you're not really saving any money by buying a $50 seat. It's up to you what you're going to buy. But ultimately the best seat is a high-end Brooks saddle with everything in it, a very sophisticated spring mechanism, great leather. If you take care of it, that's going to last for 5 decades. So if you buy, for every 5 years, you're going to buy a cheap $50 saddle, it's going to add up to eventually cost more than if you bought a luxury saddle. But in any case, I'm not trying to convince you either way. If your seat bone fits on the seat, you're going to be comfortable. Here is the thing about the Brooks. In order to make it last for a half a century, you have to use the proof hide made and provided by the company Brooks, and not use any tricks. Do not submerge it into oil or water. Don't follow any of the videos that tell you to. You can see on this Brooks, my two hip bones have begun to break in the saddle on the two sides, and you have adjustments on the saddle as well. So it's going to last forever. Why did I switch over for the cheap saddle on the right? Because the Brooks saddle does not look good with a hefty state-of-the-art suspension mechanism, and as I'll show you in the next picture, I eventually decided to go the next level. The first level is to get a comfortable seat so that you're sitting on your sit bone, and that's going to give you all the support you would ever want, but it's not going to give you much of a suspension. Granted, the top-end Brooks is going to have some suspension springs built into it, but today we have much more modern suspension mechanism built into the seat post under the saddle, and I decided to try one of those, and they just look better with the wide cheap butterfly saddle. Once you have a saddle that's wide enough for your sit bones to actually get real support, you're going to be supported. Every bump you're going to feel the way it should feel, hitting your sit bones, not your loins. But most of these seats, even though they have springs, are not going to give you that much of a suspension. So they give you support, but not suspension. Suspension is something different. The Brooks has the best springs. The high-end Brooks I'm talking about, seats that cost at least $200. They have really good springs, but today's technology has even more to offer. The one I have is the one on the right. It's the Thudbuster. It's the bulkiest. It has the longest travel. It costs at least $200, but it lasts a lifetime. I mean, it's made like a rocket. It's very solid. The elastomer is made out of rubber, but I certainly would recommend it for somebody who rides a small wheel bike that has a long seat post. In fact, if you're very tall, you're going to need an adapter because you don't have anything long enough for somebody 6 foot tall. Say you have a Brompton or a Birdie or something like that. The one in the middle, also very expensive. It's more compact. It's made really for people riding the diamond frames of regular bicycles that don't have long stems. They don't want a lot of bulk, but they still want a lot of travel, and this is giving you that travel. The one on the left is dirt cheap, and it's a great starter stem if you don't want to spend a lot of money. I also would recommend it for the high-end Brooks saddles, just because putting something like a Thudbuster with or any of these fancy modern designs just looks so out of place under a Brooks seat. So for those kind of seats, you already have the most sophisticated spring suspension that you can buy from the market. So I would recommend either a telescoping or a spring-based, very simple tubular design that does not distract from the visual excellence, the visual looks of the Brooks saddle. So this is all I have to say in this video. If you get a wide enough saddle, and if you get some kind of a suspension seat post underneath, you're gonna do as much as can be done today to ensure a supportive and comfortable ride on any type of bicycle. Again, this is it for the current video, but
I'll be back.